Nites. Welcome back. Welcome in. We've got new folks. I tell you, it's January, and I said, is anyone going to come? We are literally the earliest the second Thursday can be. It's the earliest Nerd Night can be in a year. And look around. Y'all came out. I don't know if your New Year's resolution was to get out more, but if it was, nice job. Check that off. And then don't forget to come out more next month as well. But welcome. If we have not met before, if you need a refresher, because I'm wearing glasses, so how could you recognize me? I'm Emily. I'm here from the library, and I am so happy to be at Live for another Nerd Night. I want to say it's number 104, 103. We're on to 3 digits now, regardless. So first off, I want to say thank you. Thank you to you for being here. Thank you for the library for doing something so cool. I love saying, yeah, we do a library event at a nightclub. Sure we do. It's totally cool. And speaking of the nightclub, thank you to Live. What a wonderful partner. I love that they open up early for us and we kick off the night and then we leave, and the people who party beyond 9 p.m. on a Thursday, they enjoy the space that we've warmed up for them. It's wonderful. And thank you, because we wouldn't have Nerd Night if people didn't come out and want to hear it. And of course, we also wouldn't have Nerd Night if we didn't have wonderful nerdy speakers. I know, let's give them all a round of applause. Tonight we've got Eileen Johnson talking about stressing the stressors of stress. Jade Marks, who is going to talk about how it's complicated, the science, sex, and synergy of lichens. And then we'll end with Jess Lee, Droplets for Droplets, how microfluidics can help keep our water safe. But first, it's time for your Nerd Night Minute. Join me in welcoming my wonderful coworker, Steve, to talk to you about super cool things that I'm realizing I don't want to spoil, but it's super interesting, so stay in your seat.
Thank you very much. First of all, to start off, raise your hand if you like crossword puzzles. Who are my crossword people out there? Anybody go to the Midwest Crossword Tournament in Chicago recently? Not that one? Okay. That's the shirt. It'll make sense in a second. So tonight, to start us off, we're going to talk about Normandy, Nazis, and nerds. Actually, there's more than just nerds. However, I needed to get the alliteration in, so that was the only other N thing that I could come up with. Or were the Germans tipped off about the D-Day invasion plans? I'm also a history nerd. So for those of you who need a little bit of refresher, the Second World War in 30 seconds. September 1st, 1939, Germany invades Poland, thus kicking off the European phase of the Second World War. France, being France, surrenders. Any French people here that I just offended? My bad. France surrenders less than a year later, June 22nd, 1940, after the lightning blitz invasion by the Germans. December 7th, 1941 brings the United States into the war with the attack on Pearl Harbor. Adolf Hitler makes one of his great blunders and decides that he's going to declare war on America too, which brings us into the European War. January 20th, 1942, a dark day. The Wannsee Conference convenes. This is the planning of the final solution and the extermination of the Jewish people in Europe. However, slightly brighter news. November 8th, 1942, Operation Torch. Allies begin landing in North Africa to defeat the Nazi armies. They do this by May of 1943, which follows up by September of 1943, Operation Avalanche, the invasion of Sicily and the retaking of Italy and the defeat of the fascist Mussolini government. That brings us to 1944. Plans are well underway for us to retake the continent of Europe, and that means an invasion of France. That will be on June 6, 1944, D-Day. And this is our D-Day invasion plan. We've got the most secret plan in the Allied invasion. It is Operation Overlord. It is technically scheduled for sometime in early June when the weather cooperates, and if you are from Michigan, you know how well the weather cooperates. But this is a plan that will invade northern France at the area called Normandy. It is not the most logical place to land. That would be Calais, because that's the closest point from the English Channel. However, this is the surprise. And it involves U.S., Canadian, and British landing forces in Normandy on a series of beaches. Let's take a look at those, because this is where the actual secret sauce comes in. Operation Neptune is a massive naval armada that will land these forces on the beaches of Normandy. Omaha and Utah beaches are dedicated to U.S. Army control. Golden Sword for the British Army, and Juno for the Canadians. After the beachhead has been secured, we're going to land and build an artificial pier called Mulberry. This is Operation Overlord. Remember those code names. Because the thing that freaks out British counterintelligence is, what if there's somebody who's stealing our secrets? And in particular, if you were a British counterintelligence officer and you suddenly started seeing these code words appearing in public places, what would you do? Now, since 1940, the British had done a pretty good job of finding German spies in the British government and turning them into double agents. But there's always that question, did we find them all? And this is the question. Did somebody steal our plans and leak them to the Nazis? This is the part where the crossword puzzle comes in. Because in May of 1944, in the London Telegraph Daily Crossword Puzzle, May 2nd, 17 across, one of the United States, 4 letters. Well, how many states are there that have 4 letters? Well, we've got Iowa. We don't want to talk about Ohio, but there's Utah. And 3 weeks later, 3 down, in Indian on the Missouri, 5 letters. Well, that would be an Omaha. And on May 27th, 11 across, a bigwig, 8 letters, is, say it with me, an overlord. Are we seeing a pattern here? Well, the British Intelligence Service certainly was. And on May 30th, 11 across, this bush is at the center of nursery revolutions. That would be me throwing a remote. I'll get that in a minute. A Mulberry. I'll get that in a sec. Can we guess what the final one is? June 1st, 5 days before the D-Day invasion, 15 down, Britannia and he hold to the same thing, 7 letters. That is, if you know the song, Rule Britannia, Rule the Waves, the people of Britain shall never be slaves. Well, that would be King Neptune. What in the world is the British Intelligence Service thinking at this point? They're thinking, oh my God, can it possibly be this man, the London Telegraph daily puzzle editor Leonard Daw? Well, let's go through his statistics. He's a Cambridge-educated man, graduated in 1912. He is an amateur UK football player. He is a First World War veteran. He is a school teacher at the elite Strand School in Surrey. And since 1925, he's been the compiler of the London Telegraph daily crossword. Not exactly the best resume for a German spy. But is it possible that this quiet, unassuming school teacher was in fact a secret German agent? And if so, how did he get the code words for the Overlord invasion? British Secret Service wants to know. And so their big question is this actually something sinister, or is this just a complete coincidence? And so they basically say, well, let's go back and look at some of the past crossword puzzles. And in 1942, there was a disastrous British and Canadian commando raid on the French port of Dieppe, where Dieppe was one of the crossword clues as well. That seems kind of a coincidence, because Dieppe is a completely unessential town that only happens to have a secret German submarine base on it. So the British Secret Service goes and interviews Leonard Daw, which means they detain him and they interrogate him for hours at a time, place him in solitary confinement, and hold him until after the D-Day invasion has actually happened. They eventually concluded that this was, in fact, just a complete freak coincidence. But wait, there's more. 40 years later, at the 40th anniversary of the D-Day invasions, a now not-so-young man comes forward and says, actually, you know what? We were the ones that gave him these words. He was a schoolboy at the school where Daw taught. They suggested words for him to put into his crossword. Now, where did they get that? Well, they're boys, and they're soldiers that are nearby, and the soldiers play with the boys. And they apparently were letting slip certain words here and there, maybe, that included things like Utah and Omaha. And this is the sort of thing that makes intelligence officers freak out. because it's not the big spy that you worry about. It's the little bits and slips and whatnots here and there. So maybe this was just a huge coincidence. However, I also have to share my favorite quote about this. As people started to suspect maybe Leonard Daw has something to do with it, many people were very surprised that this mild-mannered school teacher could possibly be a German spy. And of course, he was a good, loyal British man. In fact, they said, "We were astonished at the thought that Daw was a traitor. He was a member of the local golf club." As if somehow being a member of your local British golf club can exonerate you from being a Nazi traitor. In any case, as far as we can tell, this was in fact just a terrible coincidence. Here you can see the collected crossword puzzles with all of the different answers reflecting the Normandy invasion. Fortunately, as we all know, the invasion did go off successfully. Nazi Germany was defeated, Hitler committed suicide, and we won. But it still begs the question, was that really just a coincidence? We'll leave that for you to think about. Nope, that's somewhere down there too.
What size do you need?
Oh no, I got the batteries. It's the back one.
Over your foot.
Oh, perfect.
There it is, right there.
Right there in front of your chair.
Let's see. Thank you, sir. There you go. Try not to. So, as you just saw that, welcome Eileen Johnson. She is a biomedical engineering PhD student giving her defense later on this semester, right? Yeah. This semester. So, she is probably well-versed in the problems of stress and dealing with it. And I think we can all use a couple lessons on dealing with stress and the stressors in our lives. So, without further ado, welcome Eileen Johnson, future Dr. Eileen Johnson.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Let's see. Let's make sure. Hopefully this works still. Anyway, hi. Yeah, is there a way to turn off the flashing lights? Thank you. Hopefully nobody's photosensitive. I promise there's no flashing lights in my presentation. But anyways, my name, as they said, is Eileen. I am hoping to graduate this semester, so by the spring, hopefully I will be officially done with school, and I can tell my family I'm done with school. That'll be good. But today I'm going to be talking about stressing the stressors of stress. So essentially, talking about everybody's favorite subject, stress. So who here has ever felt stressed? This light might be contributing to that, but go ahead, raise your hand if you've ever felt stressed. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And stress is a very, very common feeling, right? I think we can all relate to feeling stressed, especially when there's epileptic-inducing lights flashing. But what is stress exactly? Stress is a biological response, at least biologically speaking. It's a response to an external stimulus. And can I pause? Okay.
But I'm very impressed, and I appreciate your striving forward. We're going to just reset, and guess what? You can even start all over.
This is perfect. Perfect music. Oh, it's okay. Yeah. The 70s were back, so it's time for the music to come back too. best? Should I? I don't know how to exit it. Yeah, I think that'd probably be easiest. Yeah. Gonna do a little rearranging of some wiring. One moment, please. Testing, testing, testing.
Everyone jump back in time 6 minutes or so. Here we go.
Thank you. And thank you all for your patience. So, who here has ever felt stressed? Maybe a little bit. And so, when we talk about stress, it's both a cause and effect, an input and an output. Biologically speaking, stress is a survival response. It's basic reactions that have been coded into our instincts by our ancestors many, many, many years ago. When our brain recognizes a threat or a stress stimulus, then in the amygdala and hypothalamus, which is about here and here, then it sends these signals to the sympathetic nervous system, which causes a cascade of effects in the body to then produce the stress response. These things include, thanks to the addition of stress hormones to the body and the increase of these stress hormones, things like increasing your heart rate, increasing breathing, and even prioritizing using sugar as the primary energy source because it's the fastest way to get energy. And you've probably heard of this before. It's better known as the fight, flight, or freeze response. And like I said, these are instincts that have kept humans alive and all animals alive for as long as they are alive. That's why they're still around. And so, like I said, stress is not inherently bad. It can make you as strong as the Hulk or even as fast as the Flash. These are pretty impressive feats, right? And we're really, really good at surviving this stress. I mean, there's a reason that we're still around. Typically, after the threat has left the environment and your brain recognizes that you're safe, then your parasympathetic nervous system comes through to help you rest and digest and repair any damage that may have occurred during the stress response, but then also to just help you sleep and, keep moving. This is also sometimes known as the feed and breed cycle. And this is essentially what your body does every day to keep you safe. I've massively oversimplified this process, of course, because like anything else that has to do with being alive, it's overly complicated. But this is essentially what it is. So then why can stress be so dangerous for us? If it's a survival response, isn't it supposed to keep us alive? Well, the problem is whenever that stressor never leaves. If the stress stimulus is present continuously, then the brain can never get you to enter the parasympathetic nervous system cycle. So the stress remains and the stress response remains, and you just keep pumping your body full of those hormones. And this causes a chronic fight, flight, or freeze. You cannot enter the rest and digest cycle because you're still in pure survival mode. And like I mentioned, this can have some pretty harmful effects in the long term because your heart rate is increased and other impacts on your heart. There's an increased risk of heart disease and things like a heart attack. There's stomach inflammation that's generally caused, and this can cause things like a lower appetite, and even because of the preference for using sugar as an energy source, there's a decrease in nutrient absorption for things like proteins. Since the immune system is really closely tied to your nervous system, there's a caused weakened immune system and then even a lowering of any kind of healing that's done. And this also impacts your DNA down to the very core, causing genetic instability, malignancy, cancer. And finally, it impacts the physical makeup of your brain. It can actually cause atrophy, which is brain shrinking, and problems with other types of brain repair. And like I mentioned with the brain, it can actually change the brain structure, causing damage to your neurons, which can be kind of thought of as your thinking cells, and atrophy, which I said is shrinking. And then this impacts your memory and learning. It can impact how you store and then how you recall memories. You might not store things as effectively. It can also impact the way you learn things, the way you evaluate new information. And finally, it's also been linked to things like depression, anxiety, and even Alzheimer's disease. And this is all chronic stress. Even mild chronic stress has been linked to many of these effects. But, and this is the important part, we are more than just our instincts. Stress hormones are great for action and keeping us going, but they're not so great for rest. And it's our ability to think beyond these instincts that has made us into what we are today. So in the past, our ancestors would have been able to survive by fighting to win their dinner, running away to escape a predator, or freezing in spot to avoid being noticed. But as people living after the Industrial Revolution, many of these instincts are useless at best and maybe even harmful at worst. So those same stress responses now might look like getting a fist fight over the last box of Oreos, running away from a difficult conversation, or staying very still so that a stressful email will not find you. These are no longer viable forms of survival. And we still have all those instincts, but how we treat them now is a little different. Dilbert is not a very good source for learning how to deal with stress in a healthy, supportive way, because, as I mentioned earlier, chronic stress can actually cause damage to your cardiovascular system, causing serious consequences. But I think this shows how we kind of think about it today. And also, hopefully I don't get sued by Scott Adams. If you know the creator of Dilbert, Scott Adams, you know he is stingy. Yeah. Thank you. And so how we respond to this stress is a core part of any culture. This is what I study. Specifically, I study engineering undergraduate students, but the framework that we use to yeah. But the framework that we use is applicable in broader senses too. It's not just specific to one group. And so we can think about culture like it's the water around a fish. The more we try to define it, the harder it can be to pin down, but it's also everywhere. It is always present. It's mostly invisible, but it's very strong and powerful, right? It can shape the very movements of our lives. And then in this metaphor, it's like a fish can know that it's wet, but can the fish really know what water is? Can it define water? And these things are also contextual, so kind of like the tropical seas versus the Arctic Ocean. Things are very different depending on the context of the group. So like, you know, undergraduate engineers versus like maybe established Wall Street bros or something. Stress can be considered a predator in this like ocean metaphor. How stress is treated by the culture is then key to understanding how these ancient survival responses manifest in our daily lives and then how they actually impact us. Today it can feel like stress is everywhere you turn. As mentioned, I am hoping to finish my PhD within the next coming months, and I have been recommended like over 5 books on productivity in the past few months alone. I mean, people sell courses on how to be productive. It's everywhere, right? This hustle culture or the grind or whatever it is, this is the assumed correct way to be successful. This is how people say, this is how you succeed. And you can see this even in pop culture with memes, right? You've got like the old school rage comics or like OG Instagram memes. You've got some like ironic shit posts and, you know, current day memes. The hustle culture, the grind culture is still very, very prevalent in modern day. But culture, like water, is not completely solid. It is not permanent. The currents of water can change, and fish don't always have to necessarily follow those currents. They can reject or accept parts of the culture, but similarly, the culture can accept and reject parts of them. And so, thinking about culture like this can help us understand why things are the way they are. From here, we can actually look for powerful change that can support people in thriving rather than just surviving. And so, you know, we can do those kinds of things. And so what I want you to take home from my talk tonight is that you are more than what you produce. And I know that's a lot easier said than done, especially considering, you know, culture is so powerful. But it's worth trying, and I'm still learning this myself. In the work that my lab does, though we focus on engineering students, both graduate and undergraduate, there's a few pillars that we've come across for kind of building this culture that supports wellness over just stress and productivity. These things are like support, respect, flexibility, patience, empathy. For example, a broken leg to most mammals is a death sentence, but we have evidence of ancient humans who have thrived with a healed femur bone. This means that somebody took care of them, somebody helped them. And community like this is a key part of human survival. Understanding how a healthy community then can support its members is important to moving forward, creating a community that can promote healthy living or thriving rather than just getting by. And what does any of this mean, though, like in practice? In the real world, how can you kind of do anything? And the main thing is starting small, focusing on what you can control and also what has the most control over you. There's a ton of resources available. As I mentioned, resources for productivity are generally monetized. You'll find the same thing for wellness, but you don't have to pay for any of this. There's so much free things online too. And so many things are so specific to certain needs, certain age groups, certain whatever you're going through, that I think it's helpful to search for things like that. But also remembering that you don't have to stick with it. If it's not helping you, if it's causing stress, it's actually doing the opposite of what it's supposed to do, and so it's okay to drop things. It's also important to connect with others. I'm very happy to see so many people out here tonight, because I think this is a great place to do that and to build this connection. And then also it's sometimes helpful to just schedule time to take care of yourself. Includes basic needs, even like food and sleep. From the research that I do with undergraduate engineering students, you'd be surprised how many of them literally schedule breakfast, lunch, generally lunch and dinner and things like that. But it helps. And then literally just breathing can also be helpful. When's the last time you really got some like clean air on your noggin? I know for me it can be very helpful to sit down and breathe and remember that I am a person. I'm not just producing things. And appreciating myself for what I am rather than what I can make is how I am hoping to promote wellness rather than just stress and the grind culture within my own life. And so I want to say thank you to everyone who is here tonight and listened to me and talk about stress. I know it's everybody's favorite subject. And if anybody has questions, feel free to ask them now, or there's also my email if you want, and my lab's website. And then there's also some further reading here. If you want more sources about the effects of stress, trust me, I have more. So if you really want them, send me an email. But yeah, questions. I think I saw a few. Yeah. Yeah. First of all, hopefully nobody's invested too much in AI, because it is a bubble. I fear it's going to burst soon, and I think moving away from any investments could help with that. But I'm also not like a financial expert or anything. But insofar as AI impacting our daily lives, I think that using it for more monotonous things can be helpful, but I also don't think it outside of things like scheduling or whatever. It's not a serious threat to most jobs, just because, I mean, we've already seen a lot of companies have lost a ton of money on it, and that's kind of with the bubble. But I also think that it can be helpful as well for like keeping track of different symptoms or anything like that. So like kind of keeping it on the monotonous side, not so much on the therapeutic side, if that makes sense. Sorry, I didn't repeat the question. The first question was asking about AI. This question is asking about medications that could be used with stress. I myself am on an antidepressant, and so I think there's a lot of value in these things, but also I didn't start my antidepressant until I like worked with a therapist for a year or so. And so I think that, thank you. I think that's the most important thing, is to talk to someone first, but I also understand that there's a lot of access issues with that as well. And so I think then if there's problems with that, then just like looking for lived experiences of people online who have similar background or similar like kind of things as you, if they have tried these things, kind of listening to them, I think would probably be best. Yeah, I think one more, yeah. One more? Yeah, the question was about if stress has a benefit, and definitely, yeah, it can, like I said, it's a survival response, and it can still be useful in those cases. And there is some research that shows that like a little bit of stress around studying or a test can help you remember things better. And so I think that the main thing there is just like being aware of the frequency that that's happening, because if it's long term and happening a lot, then it generally has like the opposite effect as you want it to have. And so for that, it's like mostly remembering to reward the parasympathetic nervous system that comes through and heals things, because the stress response can cause a lot of damage. Is there one more? Yeah, and I appreciate the extension of the metaphor the question was about. And since I study specifically academia, who might have the most power to actually enact change? Because students can do self-care, but I mean, all the self-care in the world can't save you from a culture of grind. And so for that, I would say definitely like the people who are paid the most typically have the most power. And we are talking with higher ups. We're not just talking, I mean, we talk with students and faculty and things like interviews, but then with that information, we have taken it and made things like infographics, and I've talked with higher ups to try and like improve things or add resources or just like offer advice essentially. And so I would say that beyond that, then faculty, like professors that students have a direct contact with, can also do a lot, although faculty typically have a lot of their own stressors as well, and so it's kind of complex. But I think faculty just being open about that kind of thing, like, yeah, I can be stressed, or like, it's stressful, but this is what I do, can go a long way for helping students realize that like there's not something wrong with them because they're stressed.
Oh, no worries.
Oh, sorry. That's my supplemental research that if anybody cared about it.
All right, it is time for our first break. Take 10 minutes. Go get yourself a refill. It is 7:40, looks like. So 7:50, be back in your seats with a refill drink. Be great to our lovely bartender, Mary. Mary, we appreciate you. Thank you. See you back in 10.
So I'm here to introduce our next presenter, Jade Marks. If I keep on pausing for applause, we'll be here for a while. But let's do some more applause! Ah! Also, I should let you know that because we've had some technical difficulties, we will not be doing a second break. So if you need to grab another drink, tip the bartenders. If you need to use the restroom, feel free to go ahead and do so in a quiet and polite manner. Without further ado, Jade Marks. Jade holds a BS in Environmental Science from Indiana University and a dual MS in Soil Science and Botany and Plant Pathology from Oregon State University. She's a scientist by training, educator by trade, and artist by heart. At her day job, Jade helps researchers tell their stories through activities, narrative, art, and movement. But long before she got into science communication, Jade studied lichens. They are still her deepest passion and eternal muse. Let's welcome Jade to the stage.
Oh, okay.
And I got your clicker right here.
Clicker, drink, clicker, microphone, everything you need. Okay. Drink, clicker, microphone, everything you need. Okay, let's see. 100% of time, it works if you point it at the computer. That's what I was told. Okay, so my name is Jade. The introduction was phenomenal. You don't need to see that. One of the things I do as science communication manager at the Museum of Natural History is run a sister program to Nerd Nite, which is called Science Cafe. So if you like learning about science in a bar, guess what? You maybe have more opportunities than you realized. So we're kicking off our season on February 25th. I hope you'll join us. But that is not what I am here to talk about tonight. In the spirit of Nerd Nite, I am here to talk to you about the thing that I am most nerdy about and most passionate about, which is lichens. So lichens come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. There are many growth forms of lichens, but these are kind of the three most common. We have foliose or leaf-like lichens, fruticose lichens, which look like somebody took a little tree or a bush and put it in a shrinking machine. Then we have crustose lichens, which are like nature's spray paint. So if you've ever seen a rock or some bark on a tree that's particularly colorful, chances are you are looking at a lichen. So show of hands, now that you know what they look like, how many people have seen a lichen? Okay, most people, phenomenal. You may have also seen lichens outside of nature. So here are some lichens not in the wild. They're commonly used in exhibits, miniatures, as little trees or little bushes. Don't get me started on ethical collecting. That is a completely different talk. They're also used in planters and floral arrangements. You actually, fun fact, you cannot take me to a public place. My partner took this picture at a brunch date where I was like digging through the planter trying to figure out what lichens they were using to like keep the soil moist. Yeah, don't take me in public. Lichens also show up in Minecraft, so if you have any Minecraft fans, like look for the lichen building thing. Not a gamer. I'll leave it at that. Okay, so what do we already know about lichens? Surely someone in the crowd knows something already. We shout it out. What do we know? They photosynthesize. They're on trees. Wait, what was that? I like them. Yeah, I like them. I like them a lot. Anything else? Something about fungi, and they're kind of hi-fi. Ooh. They make a little weird yeah. Okay, that's a great place to start. They make a weird little thing together. Okay, so for about 100 years, scientists thought they knew what lichens were. The kind of understanding of lichens is that they are a partnership or a symbiosis between a fungus and a green algae or a cyanobacteria, something that photosynthesizes. And then in 2016, everybody who studies lichens got their minds blown when lichens made the cover of Science magazine. And I know that this had never happened before, and my gosh, I hope it happens again. So this groundbreaking research showed that lichens were not just a symbiosis or a partnership between one fungi and a green algae or a cyanobacteria, but there were like a minimum of 3 partners in every single lichen. Pretty amazing, right? Guess what? It gets more interesting because now we have modern genomics research, and that has shown us that lichens are not just one symbiosis, but many symbioses in one. So we have this kind of most abundant fungal partner and the algal or cyanobacterial partner, so this is like the OG partnership. But we also have other fungi who are living in, on, and among the lichen. We have bacterial communities that are living in, on, and among the lichen. We have macroinvertebrates, so these are things like water bears, tardigrades that you may have heard of, nematodes. And then we have this chemical component. So lichens are amazing little chemists. They produce over 500 known chemicals that are unique to lichens themselves. And even though this isn't a biotic thing, it actually influences all of the ecosystem dynamics in the lichen. So, long story short, it's giving everything everywhere all at once kind of vibes. Yeah, imagine how I feel. Whew. Okay, so it actually gets weirder than that. Within a single lichen, there can be a species of fungi or a species of algae. And there are different genetic blueprints for that individual species within a single lichen. Multiply that by the population, multiply that by the community. Now, I'm not a geneticist, so this is about as deep into this as I am going to get, but I will tell you that it has given me my favorite meme on the internet today. Thank you for laughing. I really thought I got out-memed by the last talk. Okay, so I promised you that we were going to talk about sex in the title. So let's talk about sex. Okay, so many of the fungi that show up in lichen reproduce sexually. You know, when you go in the forest and you see a fungi that's putting up a mushroom as a fruiting body, this is how the fungi is reproducing via spores. Okay, so the fungal partner in lichens does this. It makes spores. Lichens can also reproduce asexually. So they make these little balls of fungal hyphae and algae that are like the whole package. Some reproduce sexually, some reproduce asexually. Some reproduce sexually and asexually. Some reproduce sexually at one point in their life cycle and asexually at a different point in their life cycle. Some have the genetic material, the genetic blueprint for being able to do sexual reproduction, but they just don't do it, which is cool. Okay, so lichen sex is really complicated. Now, as a science communicator, I am a really big fan of analogies and metaphors for explaining complex concepts in science, right? Maybe when you were in school, you heard the metaphor of like a cell is like a factory, right? That's like the classic biology metaphor. So when I was in school, this is how lichen biology was taught. This was the big metaphor. So I'm going to read this because the text is kind of small and blurry. It says, Freddy Fungi was a great builder, but all that hard work made him hungry. One day, Freddy Fungi smelled something delicious, so he ran, and he met Alice Algae. Using the sun's energy, she was cooking sugar through a process called photosynthesis. Alice Algae thought Freddie was a pretty fun guy. Right? Freddie took a lichen to Alice. Yeah, so campy. Freddie Fungi went out on a limb by building a nice home. Better together, Freddie and Alice announced their symbiotic relationship in a ceremony. I now pronounce you a lichen. Okay, it's like painfully cute. But it's also very heteronormative. There's some gender stereotypes in here, very mononormative. So I would like to argue that this metaphor needs like a 21st century update. So the 2016 paper really revealed to us that the lichen symbiosis is kind of a little more like ethical non-monogamy, a little more like polyamory. So we have a minimum of 2 fungal partners here and a minimum of 1 photosynthetic partner, right? But thanks to modern genomics research, I would argue that the lichen symbioses are actually a little more like relationship anarchy. So this is a framework or a kind of way of existing in the world where we can think about different types of relationships as being equal, whether they are platonic, romantic, sexual, asexual. So bear with me here. And also forgive me from taking this from Women's Health, but it was the highest resolution image I could find on the internet. Okay, so what does this look like in the lichen? Well, we have this concept of caregiving, which could be a romantic or non-romantic relationship. That is the lichen chemistry, right? So the chemicals in a lichen are providing antibiotics, they're providing sunscreen, they are taking care of the lichen as it exists in the world. We have these endolichenitic bacteria who are entangled within the body of the lichen. We have the lichen fungi that are not that kind of most abundant partner, who are in turn either parasites or mutualists. We have the partnership between the OG most abundant fungi and the algae. We have, okay, exclusivity doesn't really show up very much in lichens, but where it does show up is in the sexual reproduction of the fungus. We have the physical intimacy of the macroinvertebrate community that's living in, on, and among the fungi. We have the meal-sharing, satisfying power of the photosynthetic partner. We have kleptobiosis, which is when 2 lichens that are growing next to each other or on top of each other steal each other's algae. Emotional support. I don't speak lichen. I don't know. I haven't had a chance to ask them, but maybe this will be my dissertation. I'm not sure. Okay, so actually, I'm going to go back to this for a second. So as a society, I hear a lot about we're thinking a lot more about the gender binary, about hierarchy in relationships. And what I challenge myself to do, and what I would challenge any other biologists who are in the room to do, is think about things like queer theory, for example, as not just a metaphor, but rather as an analytical framework that can allow us to ask new questions about biology that haven't been asked before. That's what I'm here to do. Okay. All of that aside, it's still pretty practical to think of a single body of lichen, or a thallus, that's with a TH for those of you who still have your mind in the gutter, as an individual species, right? Because when you go out in the field and you're collecting these organisms, you need to figure out what you need to collect to move your research questions forward. The problem is that lichens are incredibly difficult to tell apart. Does anybody want to take a guess at how many species are on this rock? Okay, be quiet. I have a degree in this stuff, and I would not venture a guess. This is like, yeah, you're getting into dangerous territory here. So to display this, we're gonna play a little game that I like to call Same, Same, Different, which is not to be confused with the popular beer that you can buy at Homes. Okay, I have 2 lichens here, one specimen on the bottom, one specimen on the top. Raise your hand if you think this is the same species of lichen, just based on visual inspection. We got one here, same species, same species. Anybody? Same species, going once, going twice, 3, okay, maybe a fifth of the room thinks this is the same species. Guess what? It's the same species. All of you people who did not raise your hands are wrong. That's okay, it's really hard. Let's try it again. Redeem yourselves. Okay, so the bottom picture has stayed the same, the top picture has changed. Raise your hand if you think this is the same species. Ooh, cautious. Okay. They're different species. Okay, thanks for playing. Okay, so the good news is this is not the only way to tell lichens apart, right? Emily, do we have time to do a very, very quick experiment? Great, come on over. Oop, okay, 6 minutes.
Total, not for an experiment, but you knew.
This is not a 6-minute experiment. Okay, I'm gonna ask Emily, because she's such a good sport, to hold my microphone. That's not it. I'm going to ask Emily to put a drop of common household bleach on 2 different lichens. Okay.
Which one?
So we're gonna put a drop of bleach on this lichen.
It's real bleach. I can smell it.
Okay. What can you explain to the crowd what's?
So the drop of bleach is sitting on the lichen. But that's really about all I see. It's a little bubbly, but other than that, it just looks like a little bit of a wet lichen.
Okay, so we got a little bit of wet lichen syndrome over here. Okay.
Right here?
Yeah, like maybe in that like crevice right there. Like and like like you can mix it in. Don't just drop like like make sure it.
Ooh, yeah. Look at this. It's changing color. Like any good experiment for someone who's not a scientist. It looks like it's turning like a pinkish color.
Oh my God, you made it bleed. What are you doing?
Oh gosh, I'm no expert. I'm a librarian, not a scientist.
Okay, so do you think these are the same species or different species?
They reacted differently, so I'm gonna guess that they are different species.
They're different species. Let's give Emily a round of applause. Okay. So what Emily is seeing is a chemical reaction between the bleach and a chemical that's in the lichen called lichenoric acid. Lichens use this as an antibiotic. Humans use it as a pink dye and to tell lichens apart. So humans have been using lichens as dye for as long as humans have been dyeing things. It shows up in indigenous cultures, in tapestries that are in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Yeah, it's phenomenally gorgeous natural dye. And this is the part where I'm going to swing you through a crash course in all the amazing things that lichens have given to humanity and science. Lichens are also phenomenal natural medicines. So those same antibiotic chemicals show up in natural tinctures and plant-based deodorants. I actually use this deodorant, if you care to know. Lichens are also incredibly sensitive to pollution, which makes them incredible little biomonitors. So you can estimate the amount of nitrogen or sulfur deposition in a polluted environment based on the number of lichen species you see in that place. This is a really popular low-budget method for doing biomonitoring, particularly in Europe and in the Pacific Northwest. Lichens are camouflage. Oh, I know. So creatures great and small use lichens to conceal themselves when they are freezing, fight, flight, or freeze, right? Learned that from the last talk. Hummingbirds decorate their nests with lichens to stay hidden. They're also the foundation of food webs. Things great and small eat lichens, everything from snails and mollusks all the way up to deer, caribou, and even people. Lichens are also important in nutrient cycling. So this is some research from my master's thesis. Lichens provide most of the nitrogen in old-growth forests in Oregon. So the older a forest is, and the fewer symbiotic nitrogen fixers like nitrogen-fixing plants that they have that have been shaded out as forest secession happens, the more and more the forest relies on nitrogen to recycle those, relies on lichens to recycle those nutrients. Lichens have also been to Mars, kind of. So lichens have been through the rigors of the International Space Station. They've been through Martian atmospheric simulations. Scientists think that if there is life on other planets, it may look suspiciously like a lichen. And in fact, when astrobiologists are doing simulation missions, and they are practicing what it would look like to land on another planet and collect biological material, they use lichens to practice. Okay, so hopefully you are now head over heels for lichens, just like I am. So a few closing thoughts. What first intrigued me about lichens was how their complexity challenged my way of thinking. As a first-generation college student, I saw lichens thriving in places that they weren't supposed to thrive. I saw them overcoming adversity and persisting. As a queer person, I saw lichens building vibrant communities and creating a chosen family. I saw them challenging our norms around sex and relationships. And when I began this journey in the early 2000s, I didn't have the language for any of this. But I did have science. And science was a way that I could channel this gravity I felt towards lichens and put it into a framework that I understood using the tools I had at my disposal. So lichens can teach us a lot. They can teach us a lot about ecology, evolution, biochemistry, but also how to exist openly, creatively, and synergistically in the world. Thanks.
Alrighty, let's keep that applause going for Jade. Now, unfortunately, we do not have time for question and answer. However, at the conclusion of tonight's Nerd Night, wow, I'm looking right into that projector. At the conclusion of tonight's Nerd Night, please feel free to politely and gently ask Jade a question on the way out if you have it. Without further ado, please allow me to introduce our next speaker, Jess Lee. Jess is a fifth-year PhD student in the Department of Microbiology and Immunology at U of M with a deep passion for bacteria and the other unseen life on this planet, particularly in spaces heavily influenced by human activity. In their free time, they enjoy tangling yarn in precise ways to somehow make stuffed animals. Let's give it up for Jess.
Thank you so much for being here. I've been to several Nerd Nights as an audience member, but this is my first time getting to be up here and to talk to you guys about something that I'm really passionate about. And so today, I'd like to introduce you to some of my research and tell you a little bit more about our drinking water system. So together, how microfluidic droplets can help keep our water droplets safe. Okay, and my first question is, has this ever happened to you? So you're working in a lab all day, and you want to make sure you don't bring anything gross home with you, so what's the solution to this? I hope you wash your hands. Then you're at the gym, and you're pumping that iron, getting those gains. What's the first thing you want to do when you get home? So, I mean, yeah, probably shower, right? Okay, and then you've got these grand plans for a homemade wonton dinner, and you've done all this work to prep it, but what's the last step you have to do? Yeah, you probably want to boil those so you're not eating raw meat, and then finally have a delicious dinner. And so if you're like me before I started working on my project, you might take a lot of this for granted, that you can just turn a knob, turn a handle, and have clean water that's safe to use. And so today I'd like to challenge that, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about the hidden biology inside of our drinking water, some of the potential biological threats to our drinking water and its safety, a cool technology called microfluidics that might be used to help study our drinking water. And then finally, some of my visions about how the stuff I learned from my research might be applied in our everyday lives, with the disclaimer that I can't see the future, so this may or may not happen. So let's start off by following a drop of water from the river to our taps. So you might know in Ann Arbor we get our water from the Huron River. So this is obviously exposed to the environment. There's animals living in and around the water. Unfortunately, we have human activity that affects water quality, such as pollution, chemical spills, littering. And so all of this makes for a lot of stuff that we don't really want to be drinking. So what we do is take that water and we put it through a treatment process where it gets cleaned up through a variety of methods to produce water that is safe for us to drink. And at the very end of this process, we add in some disinfectants. So fun fact, here in Ann Arbor, we use chloramine, but you might be more familiar with chlorine. So that's more commonly used throughout the country. And you might be thinking, isn't that the stuff we put in pool water? It is, but we put a very, very small amount into drinking water, so it has no effect on human health. It is there to make sure that bacteria are killed in the water. And so this treated water is then sent through the distribution system, like all the water mains underground, and then it goes through the plumbing in your house, and finally you turn on the tap, and there you go, water obtained. So there's a little bit more to this story, as there is to most things in life. So as you can probably imagine, there are a lot of bacteria in the Huron River. That's just the way things are. There's bacteria everywhere in the world. At the treatment plant, they're good at getting rid of a lot of the bacteria, especially those that tend to make us sick. However, at the volume that they're working at, where they're treating millions of gallons per day, it's just not feasible to get rid of absolutely every bacterium. So there are some that remain. And so part of the reason that we put the disinfectants in is to try to get rid of those. But all the same, there are some bacteria that will just be able to survive because they're just that hardy. And so throughout the distribution system, as the water ages, the disinfectant can start to break down, and these bacteria can start to grow again. So the result is when you drink water, you are drinking bacteria. Before you freak out about that too, don't worry, most bacteria are pretty cool, or at the very least harmless. So if you've ever had cheese or yogurt, you can thank bacteria for making those from milk. If you've heard of the gut microbiome, that's a collection of bacteria and fungi and viruses and things called archaea that live all in your digestive tract, and they help you get essential nutrients. They help make sure that your gut is healthy. They even help plants out. If you've ever heard of the rhizosphere, those are bacteria that grow on the roots of plants and make sure that they get all the nutrients that they need to grow big and strong. So some bacteria are pretty cool, and all of them are very important. But there are a very small minority that do cause diseases in humans, and so those are things that unfortunately can sometimes get into the water system. And so if you remember back last March, I think, where there was that water break on Plymouth Road and that prompted a boil water advisory, that was because the fact that the pipes had broken meant that stuff could get in and potentially contaminate the water. So as the water infrastructure ages in this country and gets taxed with more and more use, there are these potentials for infrastructure damage and water quality compromise. Additionally, you might remember the Pacific Palisades fires last year in Los Angeles. So even before there was that fire damage to the infrastructure, they had been using so much water to fight the fires that the water pressure lowered in the whole distribution system. And that meant that stuff could also start getting into the pipes, and they had a boil water advisory too. And so as we see more of these natural disasters and as things like AI data centers like use more and more water, those are also issues that we can start to run into. And so those are potential problems targeting our infrastructure. So what kinds of threats should we be worried about? So as a disclaimer, I'm going to show you a graph. It's the only one I'm going to show, and I'll walk you through it. So please don't be afraid. This is data from the CDC on the reported number of drinking water-associated outbreaks in the US from 2015 to 2020. So this data should hopefully be somewhat reliable. So I'll give you a second to kind of take a look at this and see if there's anything that stands out to you. Yeah, that's the first thing that I notice is like, what the heck is going on in the healthcare system? Like, why are there so many outbreaks? And so I want to point you back to the word reported. So despite how important this data seems, it's actually not mandatory to report this data. And so I suspect that the healthcare system is more used to sharing this with the CDC. So we might see closer to 100% reporting versus, say, like at a casino, they probably don't want people to know that's happening. So there's probably some amount of underreporting in the other categories. The other thing that really stands out is how much of this graph is that yellow color. So it seems like the majority of these outbreaks are associated with something called biofilms. So what is a biofilm? So you have actually probably encountered a biofilm before. If you've ever had your favorite water bottle that you use all the time and then you maybe just put off washing it for a bit because like it's just a hassle, and then you put it off and you put it off. And then when you finally wash it, it's kind of slimy on the inside. That is a biofilm. Yeah, please wash your water bottles. And to kind of explain what biofilms are, they are bacteria that are living within a structured community. And so I know a lot of people aren't used to thinking of bacteria as more than things that cause diseases. So I'll provide a little metaphor. So when you think of an ecosystem, we have, for instance, in a forest, we have all the trees, we have the soil, we have the rocks and mountains that provide the habitat that animals then live in. And so for the biofilm, we have that slimy sort of jelly-like substance. And within it, we have a whole bunch of different species of bacteria. And moreover, we see a lot of different interactions between these bacteria. So you might know about the wolves in Yellowstone. So I'll walk through that kind of really quick. At one point, we basically hunted all the wolves in Yellowstone to extinction, and this led to the elk population increasing rapidly, and that led to overgrazing and damage to the soil health as well as to the plant health, and overall the habitat suffered greatly. So through very concentrated efforts, we managed to reintroduce wolves. They ate the elk, which then kind of relieved that pressure on the habitat. So they had an indirectly positive effect on the habitat. They also provided carcasses for scavengers, and through some cascading effects on coyote and fox populations, they influenced the populations of rodents, which then affected seed dispersal and plant growth. So there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a very complex web of interactions, both positive and negative, and the same holds true in bacterial communities. So in the same way that we had elk overpopulation causing damage to the habitat, we might have, say, this little green pickle guy who's bad for our water quality in some way. And so we really want to know what are some of the things that we might be able to do to stop this by using the people who are, or the bacteria who are there already. And so the problem with this is that we just don't know what's going on in these communities. There's just so little data that's been done, that's been taken, and so few studies on this. And so that's something that I was really interested in looking at, was how can we leverage bacteria that already exist and take their relationships and modify them so that we have some sort of benefit. And this unfortunately runs into a pretty big math problem. So the way that we typically study bacteria interactions in the lab is to grow them together and see how they behave versus when they're grown separately. And so if you have two species, you can do them separately and then grow them together. So that's 3 different experiments, and that's pretty easy to set up. I would do that in one day. If you have 3 species, then you have a couple more pairs, and you have to grow them all together, and that's 7. And then with 4, you have even more, and you can kind of see that the problem is starting to explode exponentially. And so with 10 species, which I will tell you is very low diversity for the drinking water system, we have 1,000 different experiments, and I don't want to be the one that's setting that up, in test tubes especially. So what we do in our lab is use this cool technology, if it will load. Oh. Oh my God, you've been predicted. It would be the.
You haven't finished your talk yet, but we're done with the Q&A right now.
Okay.
Then we'll go back to talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. So the question was, where are the pictures from? So I drew them myself. Yeah. I've been interested in art for a long time, and I was like, oh, why not combine it with my interest in science communication? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. The question is, how often do I wash my water bottle? Okay, in my defense, I don't put my mouth on my water bottle. So there are fewer germs going in because your mouth has so many germs. So not as often as I should, but I have my reason for it. Yeah? That's a good question. So would lichen be involved in this in any way? So unfortunately, no, because all of our pipes are covered, so there's no light going in, so they can't photosynthesize and they can't survive in that environment. Yeah, so that's actually a problem with one of my experiments that I did, where I didn't cover it up, and so I didn't get quite what I was expecting to grow in there, because they did have that light source.
And we are back in action.
Okay. So speaking of my experiments, one of the tools that I use a lot are microfluidics. And so to break down this word, we have micro. Oh, that looks a little odd. That's okay. Yeah, it should be aligned, but it's okay. So we have micro meaning small and fluidics meaning liquids. So basically I use very small amounts of liquids to study these bacteria. And so, yay, it's playing. So this is what I make. So you can see these little bubbles, and inside of the bubbles is water, and outside of it is oil. And you probably know that water and oil famously don't mix. So it creates a very stable little bubble of water. And within this, we can put bacteria inside. And because the oil and water don't mix, the bacteria are unable to leave this little bubble, so whatever was in there stays in there, and it basically allows them to act as miniature test tubes. And what's really cool is that with just this little tiny amount, which you can see with my hand for scale, we have about 100,000 of these little tiny test tubes in there. So that whole problem with like, oh, I need 1,000 experiments, easy. I can do that in like a minute. And so the challenge then is to actually get biofilms to grow inside, because biofilms often need a surface to attach to and then grow on. And so you can see that in these droplets, when there's no surface, they kind of just grow everywhere. I don't know if you can see kind of this like grainy fuzziness. Those are all cells that are being packed together in this little droplet. And I don't know if this is showing up super well, but the red is we engineered the bacteria so they glow, and it's easier for us to see them. And so what I did was I put some little plastic beads in there, and then we can really see with the red here that they seem to be attaching to that surface. And so that's a really good marker that these surfaces are actually there for them to attach to, and they will do it. And so if we kind of burst all of these bubbles, we can see, okay. Yeah, these images are not great for projecting. But if you can see, there's all these kind of tiny little things, and those are all one cell. And so you can kind of see they're mostly just spread apart and not really together. Versus with the beads, we can see that there's all these like crazy 3D structures on them that are really, really red. And so this is indicating to me that there is some sort of structured bacterial growth on the surfaces. That means that we can actually grow biofilms within these droplets. And so I hope to use this technology to actually study what's happening in the biofilms in our drinking water supply. So we might have this really complicated community with a lot of different members, and by putting random subsets of them into all of these droplets, we can see which ones grow best and which ones don't grow super well, and figure out who in there are friends with each other and who doesn't like each other. And maybe we can use that information to determine what would be good to introduce into a system, for instance, to help mitigate a problem, or know like, oh, this is a warning sign that they might try to bring their friend in who we don't want in the water. And so we might have some sort of test that we could do on the drinking water supply. And I'm not kidding. I literally will just swab the inside of my shower hose for samples. It does feel like I'm giving it a COVID test. And so by knowing what's in there, we might be able to help like hospitals manage the risk, or figure out which areas should be prioritized for infrastructure upgrades or rebuilding after natural disasters. And so if I have time, I would be happy to take any questions. Or, okay, yeah. Yeah, so the question is, can overcleaning be bad? And so actually, that's interesting because we do have something called the hygiene hypothesis, where like we live in a society that's like now too clean, and our immune system like doesn't have things to fight off, so it develops allergies instead. And so that is potentially a problem. I will say, because of how hard it is to kind of get into a lot of the plumbing system and the water mains especially, I think that there will always be at least something in there. We'll never get it 100% sterile. So at the very least, I think there will always be something there to kind of give us that challenge that we need for our immune system. Yeah. Yeah, so that's a great question. So how do we get like all of these different combinations in here? So it's really cool. There's something called a Poisson distribution, and it just tells us how many number of things end up in droplets. And it turns out that it will just encapsulate things randomly following that distribution. So if we have like this mixed population that's going in, we know that a set number will have 3 different things, 3 different cells inside. Some will have like 4. And just by random chance, we'll get a whole bunch of different combinations. So we can't necessarily guarantee that we'll get every combination, but if we make enough of them, then it's likely that we'll cover like a lot of combinatorial space.
Well, thank you all so much. Thanks, huge thanks. First of all 3 speakers, did you see how cool they were when things were going not exactly as we planned? Also, did you see how cool you all were with like riding the waves with us? I'll tell you, this is not how it usually goes. But even if it was, thank you for staying, and thanks. Come back. Come back. Come back next month. Next month, believe me, we are going to double check so many things. Things are going to work so great next month. So put it on your calendar. But if you don't want to put it on your calendar, you could sign up for our mailing list on the way out, and you'll get an email from me the Monday before Nerd Night telling you everything that's going to be on there. And that's the only email you get on that list. So don't worry. You're not going to hear from me when you don't want to, just the Monday before Nerd Night. And that's it. So head out, be safe, and we'll see you on February 12th.